Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lyft Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lyft Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lyfteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lyfteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show.
All right, everyone, we are back again for our fourth episode with Vincent Stanley, Director of Philosophy at Patagonia. Vincent, welcome back.
Good to be back.
So far, as a recap, we've gone through vision, culture, and strategy at Patagonia. And now we're looking to speak a little bit about operations at Patagonia and some of the insights there. And we were joking that if we run out of time, we'll talk about what's most on our mind right now and what excites us. So we'll see if we get to that or if we stay in operations. So Vincent, let's talk about goals and KPIs and annual goals, et cetera. And how do you think about that at Patagonia?
Well, I think that we're looking, of course, at sales and margin goals and on-time delivery and what's our percentage of returns. All of those things were the conventional business measurements we're looking at. But we also have deeply baked into the company goals for social and environmental improvement. So the most important social goal for us these days is to increase the number of clothes that are made with fair trade certified labor. And that program, which began with 9 yoga styles in the fall of 2014, has now become quite substantial. Can't recall quite the number of factories, but we're using fair trade certified labor for some of our major styles, and something like half the styles in the spring season and more in the winter season are sewed by workers who are getting a bonus, and they elect a committee that determines how that bonus is going to be paid, whether as funds or whether as, I think one factory, they elected to buy bicycles so people could get home to their kids faster. It's up to them on how to use the money. And that program, I think, we were surprised at how rapidly it spread. And I think it did spread so rapidly because the factory owners got behind it, seeing that how engaged their employees were by this effort and how it changed the feeling of the workplace. So for us, I'd say that there's a major difference in the past 10 years in how we approach goal setting and how we approach our sense of achievement. So that 10 or 15 years ago, the environmental goals would have belonged more to the environmental department, and they would be developed by the environmental department and handed over to operations as a goal, or developed in cooperation with operations. But now I see a much stronger sense of integration, especially within the product teams, that when they know what their sales goals are, they know what their goals are for developing their product line to develop products that are 5 to 10 years ahead of other people's products, et cetera. But they have a very strong sense also of owning their social and environmental goals, and knowing that they have to make more of their products with fair trade certified labor, that more of their products should be Blue Sign certified, that if they have any products left in their line that use virgin polyester, that they have to incorporate recycled. So I think that's a critical element of goal setting and also recognizing the achievement.
And in terms of, like, one of the things that I was thinking about is, could everything you make be recycled now? Like, or is it like, what's the pressure on cost versus like the sort of environmental like max environmental it could be? Like how do you figure out that right balance for a product?
Yeah. It isn't easy, but I think that when we look at a particular product and then we look at what comparable products are sold at what price, we know that we can kind of go over the top on setting a price, and we try to avoid that because it means that the product will not have a chance to succeed. But on the other hand, we also know that what we're putting into the product, we're often putting in higher quality materials that are sometimes difficult to see when it's on the sales floor. We're putting in effort to make sure that the workers in the factories and also in the mills are being paid fairly and have good working conditions. So it's also incumbent on us to communicate what we're putting into the clothes that may not be readily apparent when you look at them the first time, and to bring that across to the consumer. I think that we do less of, I think in more conventional companies, they will look at what they regard as what everybody calls the price point. Is this level of quality in this market? Is this permissible? Without testing it. And I think that we try to test that as much as possible. Not necessarily to charge more, but to make sure that we're actually making the best product and not retreating from making the best product because we're making assumptions about what people will pay.
Got it. Yeah. So one of the things that brought up is, do you do customer insights for like setting the price? Like, do you get 8 people in a room and ask them type thing, or like how do you figure out what that price point is that's the right number?
I don't know how we do it anymore, but I think we look at what it costs us, and we look at an ideal margin, and then we say, okay, is that? And then we look at comps for what other companies produce. So I think it's done that way rather than, it's certainly not done on the basis of going out and asking people what they'll pay, because they may not know what we're producing.
Yeah. And what people say and what they actually do is different too.
It can be different. So yeah, we're not producing clothes that way. So we really do. I mean, traditionally we look at the objective margin that we think we need, and then we look at the cost, and then we see how far off we are. And we might do things like, eliminate a pocket or something like that. But we're pretty sensitive to reducing the quality of the materials, and very, very sensitive to not sacrificing quality and environmental performance in order to achieve a certain price. The other thing I think that's significant, and we talked about that a little bit before, is that we do operate with tremendous constraints. A conventional clothing company can go out and use any number of off-the-shelf fabrics to produce a piece of clothing, and we operate with only a very small number of fabrics. We know they've been certified okay by Blue Sign. We know what mills they're made in. We know how they perform. We've tested them. But those constraints also force us to really know what we're working with. And by knowing what we're working with, we can often make innovations that actually make a significant difference in the performance of a product. When you're innovative, you have much less pressure to produce a lower price, because you're not dealing with a kind of familiar expectation. When you come out with a nanowear, there's no set idea for what that nanowear should cost.
Yeah. Just sort of a few random questions coming up is like, what's the best-selling piece of Patagonia clothing of all time? Is there something that is like, this is our clear bestseller of all time?
Well, probably, I think there are a few of those, but I think the Snap Tee, Cinchilla Snap Tee, is a product that was introduced in 1987, and at the time was the most highly technical piece of insulation a mountaineer could have, and now would be regarded as sportswear or as cabin wear, because its materials have become lighter and warmer and stretchier, etc. But it's still a very popular piece. Baggies are another product that have been in the line for 30 years. Stand-up shorts, not quite the seller. Better sweaters are very, very strong for us.
So the Snap Tee is like the fleece pullover?
Yes,
like
exactly.
A 3/4 snap? or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly right.
That's funny because when you said chinchilla snap tea, I was like, oh, is that a t-shirt? But because I guess it would
Yeah,
be some sort of fleece, but it turns out
yeah,
we're talking about the same
it is
thing.
the
Okay.
familiar piece.
And is that still, like, as of today, do you think that's still the best selling?
Well, I don't know that it's the best-selling item, but over that
Sure.
30-year period, it's been a strong seller, and it's been a recurrent. I mean, it's been a very strong seller the last few years. It became once again a very popular piece on college campuses. So uh, it's had not 9 lives, but about
Yeah.
3 of them.
I want to give a shout out to the performance twill jeans I'm wearing. These things,
Uh-huh.
I have 3 pairs of these, and they're like, I don't wear any other pants now.
Oh, great.
They're so
All right.
comfy.
Well, thank you.
It's stretchiness.
Yeah.
Okay, back to operations.
Yeah.
So reporting. We kind of said, to what extent is financial reporting useful, and maybe you could talk a little bit like what types of reporting you do, and then maybe we could talk about some of the standards and like Higg Index, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, et cetera. Yeah.
Right. I think we're looking at all of the data that any business our size or of any size would look at in terms of our profitability by line or profitability by sales channel. We're always looking at very complex reports on the quality of our goods. I think there are a couple of protocols that we use that we did not develop ourselves that are very useful for the company, and most companies our size would not use, and that would be the B Corp impact assessment, which is the most holistic look at the company's practices, because it tells us how we're doing with our employees, with the communities that we're doing business in, with customers, and how we're treating nature. And it's enough of a third-party look at the company that we get surprises. We find out that we're not doing as well as we thought we were doing in certain areas, and then make an effort to do improvements. That I think the first time we took the B Corp impact assessment, we were much lower on the community score than we were on others, and we took some steps in order to improve our performance there. The other, we helped start the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and that in 2011, and that has grown into an organization that has about 150 members who make 40% or more of all the footwear and apparel sold in the world. And what that organization does for us is they developed something called the Higg Index that has several different modules. One module looks at the environmental impact of individual factories, greenhouse gas emissions, energy used, waste generated, water used. Took baseline measurements the first year the Higg was introduced, and then takes those measurements year after year. So they're really trying, for the industry as a whole, to reduce that conventional environmental impact. The second is a little more complicated, which is the Higg Index looks at different processes and materials that are, and compares them in terms of their environmental and social impact. And the information is actually loaded in the ERP systems of the manufacturing companies or the brands, so that designers can look at the environmental impact of one fabric versus another. And then the third element, which has not yet been introduced, but which we're really looking forward to, is to have a consumer-facing index that would allow you to put your hang tag up against a pair of your jeans and get a reading on the environmental and social impact of those jeans, say a 9 or 90 out of 100, that would be industry-wide, that standard, so you could compare it in a store to the rating on any other on a pair of jeans from another manufacturer. These measurements really are critical to us in terms of setting goals for reducing environmental impact and improving social performance. If we didn't have these, it would be much harder to do the work we do, or to understand exactly what we're doing and then to make the decision to make improvements.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the Footprint Chronicles as well, and I'm not sure. That's what we were joking. I'm not sure if we've already talked about it on this one. So for folks, can you just give a little overview of that and like what some of the milestones have been?
Yeah. So I think it was as far back as 2003, we started to look at what other companies, much larger companies, were doing, and they were producing what are called CSR reports, or corporate social responsibility reports, and they were using one of 3 or 4 industry standards for reporting. GRI was the gold standard at that point. SASB is the gold standard now. And I wrote up a report, and we looked at it, and we said, "Nah, we don't want to run this." And the reason we didn't want to run it was too dry, and it's not how we wanted to convey the information about what we're doing to our customers. Most of the reports, if you actually read them, they're written in fairly deadly prose, and people talk about all kinds of good giving to the symphony and building playgrounds and stuff like that. But there's what we really wanted to focus on was what kind of harm do we do, or what kind of efforts do we do to reduce our harm in relation to the products we make. So what we did is we decided to create something called the Footprint Chronicles, which is an interactive website. We started with 5 products that were representative of the line, and we showed the path of these products all the way from the field or the oil well through their manufacturing, through the manufacturing of the fabric and the sewing, and took it all the way to our warehouse shelf. And we talked about, it was an interesting construct. We said, okay, what do we like about this product? What do we not like? What would we like to improve? And what do we think? That was the third element. And then we grew this over time to represent about 200 different products. We also printed, I think Nike had also done this before us, but we printed all of the factories that we use. And when we produced the Footprint Chronicles, I was expecting that customers would look at it and that NGOs would come look at it. What I was surprised to find was that it became a major internal tool. And I shouldn't have been so surprised, because I knew when I was working on the Footprint Chronicles that I was learning more about how we made goods than I had ever learned in 35 years of working at the company, just because by doing this research, I was no longer silent on the marketing or the sales side. But what happened to me also happened to the employees as a whole, that everybody became smarter in our conversations, or our discussions, our disagreements about how to make things and how to proceed. That became sharper because people had a stronger sense of what actually went into making the clothes.
Yeah, and Vincent, another reporting piece that we haven't talked about is your benefit corporation legal structure and the annual benefit reports you put out. I don't think some people may know what benefit corporations are. Basically legally requiring oneself to consider more than just profits. So that's sort of like a broad statement about benefit corporations, not the certification. But what Patagonia did, which I'm not sure many other benefit corporations have done, which is creating the specific public benefit purposes, or the specific benefit purposes in the bylaws. And I was just actually looking at an old, I guess it's because I wanted to see if those benefit purposes had changed over time, but I think they're the same 6 that you started off with. And so for example, for readers or listeners, 1% for the planet is your first benefit purpose. So can you talk about why is it important that it's in your benefit corporation bylaws as opposed to just a statement you make externally?
Well, we became a benefit corporation because we wanted to be a benefit corporation in addition to becoming a B Corp, because we wanted to write our values into the business charter and articles of incorporation. We also wanted to we wanted to articulate those values in a fundamental way, so that in the long term, the ownership of the company, that if the company is owned by the Chenard Family Trust, but in the long run, if new stockholders ever come in, that they really have to honor those values that we articulated when we became a benefit corporation. And, you can't really, I think you can talk about writing your values in, but you have to specify what those values are. So that's why we listed those 6, beginning with the giving 1% of sales every year for environmental organizations.
Yeah, and this second one, I'll just go through these because it's really interesting, I think. So the second one that you put in your bylaws is build the best products, cause no unnecessary harm to planet or its inhabitants. So I guess even though you've changed your mission, you still have it in your specific public specific purpose. And one of the sub pieces of that says, Patagonia will rate the quality of its products with quality defined and measured by durability, multifunctionalism, and non-obsolescence on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being least and 10 being highest quality, and consistently produce products that average a rating of 8 or better. I've heard isn't this called like the Yvonne, the YC standard or something like that? Or can you talk about that, what that actually means?
Yeah, the YC report card.
Yeah.
A few years back, we looked at all of the products on the line, and we said, we went back to the original chapter on design and let my people go surfing, which is very interesting because if you look at that chapter, it doesn't go through a series of didactic statements about we believe in this or we believe in that. It really starts with questions. And the first question is it multifunctional? Second question, does the product perform well for its intended use? Is it durable? Those are the top 3. And so what we did with the report card is there were 19 questions, and we condensed those down to 10. And what we do right before the line becomes final, right before we commit to making it, is we have all of the people concerned sit down in a room with a deck of cards, and it's very important to have the right people determine the particular performance of a garment in particular ways. So it's not the marketer who determines the environmental performance. It's the environmental department is looking at it, and they put down an 8 if it's an 8, or a 9 if it's a 9. It's not the product manager who determines whether the product performs for its intended use. It would be somebody from the team that does product testing, both in the field and in the lab. So we do that every time. We did that for all products the first season, and then any time we redesign a product or introduce a product, we submit it to the same test. And overall, if it falls below a 7, we usually it doesn't make it into the line. Often there will be a little delay, and then we'll make improvements to the product so that it will meet those criteria.
Yeah, so it's not the design team themselves rating it after they've designed it.
Exactly. Yeah. Or the product management team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was just noticing that within this build the best product, cause necessary harm, there's a note in the 2017 Benefit Corp report saying that 70,337 garments are repaired globally, of which 50,000 of those were in Reno. And Reno, Nevada is now the largest apparel repair center in North America.
Right.
I don't think many people know that you're the largest. Patagonia is also the largest apparel repair company in North America.
Yeah. Well, it's curious. When we came out with Common Threads, and we made the argument that when you're looking at the 4 R's, it's not just recycle, that you really have to consider first is reduce. Don't buy what you don't need. Repair what's broken. Reuse or recirculate what you no longer wear, and then recycle is what comes last in the process. But we looked at that and we said, okay, how are we doing on repairs? And the truth was that it often took 6 weeks or more, 8 weeks or more to get a repair. If you brought a broken zipper, a jacket with a broken zipper into the store, it took you a long time to get that back. And what our people were doing, because they wanted the customer to be happy, is rather than having the product repaired, they were just giving them a new jacket. And so what we decided, okay, let's reduce that wait time, that turnaround time on repairs. And we did. But every time we reduced it, we got a ton more, we get a lot more clothing in because the word got out. People actually do want to keep their garments. They get attached to them, particularly if they've used, if you take a jacket with you on a trip to the Andes, you don't necessarily want to hand it back over the counter in exchange for a new one. And so we kept doubling the number of repair operators that we had in Reno, to the point where we're now the largest repair facility in North America.
It's wild. And I don't think many people know about the part of your website where you sell used clothing.
Yeah. Well, that's fairly new.
Yeah.
And again, we're actually trying to do a couple of things with that. One is to make sure that perfectly good clothes get circulated. And second, to some extent, because people often ask us, okay, they say, well, Patagonia is good quality, but aren't you excluding a lot of the possible customer base because your prices are high? And then that becomes a circular argument. We say, well, our prices are high because we're making things to last and we're using good materials and we're paying people fairly, et cetera. But there's another, to get out of that round robin of protests and excuses, you can say, okay, well, we do make clothes with a lot that have a lot of life in them for a second round. And that lets in a lot of people who might not be able, students who might not be able to afford Patagonia firsts. So I think that's an important program.
One of the next one here that I think probably, well, maybe like I can count on like one hand how many companies I think do this, but sharing best practice with other companies. You say in this report, sharing proprietary information and best practices with other businesses, including direct competitors, when the board of directors determines that doing so may produce a material positive impact on the environment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that means and what you've done in that area?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Let's say we came up with some new material that offered superior performance in a jacket for high altitude climbing. Ordinarily, if we did that, we would get an exclusive on the fabric for the first couple of years from the manufacturer, and we have no scruples against that. That gives a company a running start. But if we introduce a fabric that has a strong environmental advantage, we think it's important not to take that exclusive and to share the fabric with our competitors from the beginning. We did that with Ulux, which is a plant-based material that's a substitute for neoprene, which is really environmentally harmful. And when we came up with this material called Ulux, the alternative, we offered it to the entire surf industry. It's used in wetsuits. And I just noticed a company in Norway making leashes out of it and windsurfing socks. And our idea of spreading the technology from the beginning is there's also a good business motive because it actually commercializes the new fabric faster, but it also we feel an obligation to when it's environmentally beneficial to get it circulated as quickly as possible.
And I remember Rose, I think I spoke with her in an interview with Rose a while back. She was saying that I think Patagonia had shared the waterless jeans technology.
Yeah,
but no one took it up because it's like, so you can share it, but it's also like you gotta have people take it up.
Yeah, you can share it, but they have to take it up. It took a while for people to take up Ulux. And organic cotton is no secret, nor did we introduce it. But not many companies have switched all of their cotton to organic.
Yeah, and it sounds like some of the other things around like in this category of workers that you've trained who were sort of not necessarily Patagonia workers, but with other brands around like chemical management practices that are associated with the Outdoor Industry Association's Chemical Management Working Group. So it looks like a lot of cross-training with people who would theoretically be competitors for an environmental benefit.
Yeah, and I think also that the word competitor, it's a funny word. Yes, we are competing with certain companies because we want customers to buy our jacket and not buy theirs. But at the same time, there's a lot of cooperation. We're all want to promote responsible stewardship of public lands. We also, many of us as manufacturers, are working in the same factories and have an obligation to work cooperatively to reduce environmental harm in those factories. And you have to be careful because you can't collude on labor practices, but we all have an obligation separately to ensure that labor practices are fair. So one of the things when we established the Sustainable Apparel Coalition is to look at environmental standards and say, no, we're not going to compete on those. I'm not going to make a claim that is contests a particular claim by another manufacturer. We're not going to muddy the waters that way. And if we look at our environmental stewardship as pre-competitive, that this is something that we all agree to, that we take off the table of competition, and that we agree that certain standards should be met by the whole industry. That's a good thing for the planet, and it's also a good thing for the customer.
So what the last two specific benefit purposes here? It's funny, I wrote a book on B Corps, and I still don't know if it's like a specific benefit or a specific purpose. It's like stuff is confusing just for folks out there who still are confused what difference is between B Corps and benefit corps. But okay, so transparency, we will provide information through our website and print about the environmental impact of items across our product lines with the best science and data publicly available. So how do you sort of balance that transparency, be as transparent as possible when, full, 100% transparency isn't really possible just because of how deep your, like, just all the tiers of suppliers and like all the complexity. So how do you really balance that?
I don't know so much a sense of balancing. I think we share what we know. And you're always making judgments about what's important, but if it tends to be controversial, we will share it. We want people to be thinking seriously and making evaluations about products or processes that might be environmentally or socially harmful and that need to be addressed. There are a lot of things we don't know. I think Walmart at one point looked at some product that may have even been something like deodorant or something, and found that there were 400 suppliers behind it. When you got to the various additives, the chemicals, what was in the packaging. So when we know that about 85% of our environmental impact as a company is not in anything we do or even have done in the clothing factories. It's in the materials. It's in the manufacture of the fabrics. And there's a lot going on behind the curtain as you go into the people who provide the various elements of the fabric and then go through the dyeing processes, et cetera. But it's not a question of balancing for transparency. It's a question of assessing what's important about what you do know. And if it's something that doesn't look too good, you better put that out there. We've actually been blessed with a pretty good reputation for our environmental and social practices. And when we feel that we have something that needs changing, we want to be the ones that present that. We don't necessarily want somebody else to be pointing that out.
And then is there ever like because you probably open yourself up for criticism potentially if something bad comes up. So how do you balance that? Or, because I think most companies are like, well, I don't want to be transparent on all this because I'll get hammered in the press or something. So how do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a dangerous position to take, that we're gonna hide something, because in the age of social media, you can have companies have been hammered by one or two customers making a complaint, or one or two NGOs pointing out a problem with a product or a process. So, I don't think people have the luxury to hide behind what they want to hide behind anymore. I think you have to presume that whatever you're doing is public, and that you should. There's another way to look at it too, which is this is we've talked about this before. We live in dangerous times. We live in a time when this twin crisis, the social crisis and the environmental crisis, are considerably worsening, and it's going to take all of our talents and our efforts to help restore communities and nature to health. And it's going to be the role of business to clean up its own act. It's also the role of business to determine what kinds of products it's going to make and whether they're actually good for people on the planet. But if you're doing that, you need to be transparent, because you need the help of all your friends. If you're actually trying to make improvements, you want people to know what the situation is and to be able to offer a hand to make the connections. By people, I can mean people within an organization, because companies that are hiding information from the outside are also hiding that information from the inside. And also that you want to share the if there's a problem, you want to be able to have the help of NGOs and universities and whoever else can help you solve it.
Well, last question here, and last specific benefit purpose: providing a supportive work environment. So it says, we'll endeavor to provide a supportive work environment and high quality healthcare through things like providing on-site daycare, subsidized childcare, and other similar items. One thing that was in this report that's pretty interesting is it says 80 employees participated in nonviolent civil disobedience training to gain the knowledge and resources needed to safely participate in marches and other acts of nonviolent civil disobedience. What was that all about? Or do you have any details on that?
Yeah, well, we this is an important company policy. We pay bail for somebody who's busted in a demonstration, but we will only do that if they've had nonviolent training.
Aha. So they have a pre-step to that.
Exactly. So recently we had a woman I worked with for 45 years, retired. She'd worked for about 40 years in the child care center. And as she was negotiating her retirement package, and said, well, I really do, I've worked this long for the company. I really do want to get my discount during my retirement. They said, oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And anything else? And she said, yeah, I'm going to have more time on my hands. So I'd like to have the bail. I'd like to keep the bail benefit. So if she, now that she has time on her hands and she wants to get arrested at a demonstration, the company will bail her out.
I love that. Yeah. Do you know off the top of your head how many employees have been arrested because of nonviolent civil disobedience?
No, I don't know off the top of my head, but I took the training.
Yeah. What's the gist? Can you give us like the 2-minute summary of nonviolent civil disobedience? Just.
Well, I think it's controlling your temper.
Fair enough.
And it's in the tradition of the civil rights, the nonviolent civil rights tradition, which is to be respectful and if you're in an illegal demonstration, to go ahead and do the act and take your arrest, but be civil about it.
Yep. And in regards to, we talked last time about on-site childcare, one of the things that came up for me is like, how do you, because Patagonia is so well known for on-site childcare, but say I'm a retail employee in Palo Alto or something, how do you scale benefits? Do they get subsidized childcare at all? Or how do you, if you're not on-site in Ventura or Reno?
Yeah, we provide benefits for people who are not on site. We just introduced childcare a couple of years ago to Reno, which is where our warehouse is, and but that's the only other place where we have on-site childcare.
This other note in the report says scaling benefits can be difficult because everyone knows pretty much that Patagonia has on-site childcare, and so when so many people want to bring their kids to work, it can put pressure on capacity and quality. So I'm curious, have you seen that at all? Like sort of having to really scale up the childcare services in Ventura or Reno because of just so much demand for the childcare facility?
Yeah, it varies. We have baby booms, and I'm sure that's not intentional, but it will happen that we'll know that in 9 months we have to provide a lot more care in the infant room. So we can plan for that. But we haven't really compromised the care. It is a really good program, and it's a very low ratio of childcare providers to kids. So it's expensive to run. But I think it's interesting. What I see, I'm not a father, but what I've seen in observing the childcare over the decades is we have an interesting twin goal of producing kids who are pretty self-reliant and at the same time well socialized. So you have kids who are very confident about being able to interact with other kids and with grown-ups. And on the other hand, you have kids with a strong sense of themselves. We have a lot of emphasis on taking risks. This is not one of the. You have a society now in which a lot of parents are afraid to practically to let their kids touch the ground because there are so many things to be afraid of, and so navigating that and raising kids who can inoculate themselves against danger rather than just avoid it is really important.
Yeah, the maybe in the last 10 or so minutes here, one of the things we had sort of dovetails with the flood of people who want to bring their kids to Patagonia is hiring generally, and we'd sort of talked about from a process standpoint, there being a lot of pieces in place around the hiring and training to get someone up to speed. Can you speak to what sort of steps go through to get someone sort of up to speed at Patagonia?
I think over the last few years, we've been able to really improve the hiring and training process. So it's very difficult to get hired at Patagonia for one, we have a lot of applicants for each position. And second, if you get close to being hired, you're subjected to interviews not only with your potential boss and your boss's boss, but also the people who would be working for you, the people who would be working with you, and often people who aren't in your department, but that you would have regular interactions with in the job that's up for grabs. So that process takes a long time, several phone interviews, and then sometimes 3 visits to Ventura. And then the onboarding process is pretty complicated. We do take people climbing for an afternoon and surfing. Every new employee goes through a philosophy class with me. It's a 3-hour session in which we talk primarily about what does quality mean at Patagonia, and also what has been the environmental journey. What is the significance of environmentalism at Patagonia? So and there's a great deal of cross training involved, and I think this is all important and beneficial because you're bringing people into an environment that's not conventional, and you want people to understand not only what the written rules are, but what are the unwritten rules? What are the cultural biases? What's the ethos of the company? And I think that the process that we have now does a good job of that. A few years ago, I think we brought people in too quickly and turned them loose before without really providing the kind of support that people needed to come on board.
So it sounds like there's at least some stuff, some philosophy with you. Is there I know Zappos does a 2-week boot camp where everyone does the same training. Is that something you all do, or is it really dependent on their job description or responsibilities?
No, it depends on their job. I've forgotten what the training is for retail employees, but it's pretty extensive. Kind of in the Zappos vein, the training for the frontline employees. But it does vary for other kinds of positions, for accounting and IT, and even for product design. Those programs will not be. It won't be a boot camp that's shared by everybody. Those programs are more tailored.
Got it. This is another random question that I was thinking about is, what do you do with people who take the "let my people go surfing" mantra a little too much? Like they go surfing for a whole day, and what do you do? Because I know Yvonne brags that he has an MBA, like management by absence or something like that, right? So are there folks that take advantage of, or how do you balance that when there's sort of an explicit, you should let people go when they want to go do something, but the people, do you have to reel people back in from taking that a little too much?
I was just talking about that with someone, and I was thinking back in our early days when we had very little. Boy, we weren't much on process, and I remember. You have to understand here, we're going 35 years back, but I remember another manager coming to me and telling me that some employee had gotten away with 11 weeks vacation in the previous year because nobody really checked. The person was entitled to 2 weeks or whatever it was at the time. We're a long way from those days, but I think that what's really important to create in a culture are the strong positive examples. So I think partly because of people going surfing and partly because of daycare, there's a lot of covering for your colleagues. That if the waves are good and somebody wants to be out for 2 or 3 hours, you will make sure that person can do that. If people are very good about covering for family leave, which is 4 months for fathers as well as mothers. So there's a positive example there of working hard, of cooperating, of letting people take the time they need to do their individual thing. But there's also, I think, a kind of concomitant pressure, which is, okay, I'm given this freedom, but I am also working hard. Now, there are going to be some people who don't subscribe to that, and then it's a matter for them and their manager to have discussions. But I think it's more important, rather than to create a culture in which slacking is not permitted, it's more important to create a culture in which all the good things are encouraged. And then I think that people tend to look at that and they say, people look at what goes on and they say, what are the real rules as opposed to the rules that are written down? What do people tolerate? What is honored here? What will earn me merit or earn me the goodwill or earn me advancement in this company? And the message is that hard work will, but also and also being cooperative, also covering for people, also working with as little ego as possible and as much as possible for the common good.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about, I didn't know if I had asked earlier. I don't think I have, but around lobbying, and you'd mentioned Patagonia or the child. We talked about the child care benefits, and in the Winners Take All book that we spoke about, I think maybe in the first session, one of the critiques on the author has of some companies is we have great employee benefits, but what are we doing to lobby or change laws to And so I'm curious how you think about maybe California has paid family leave, but do we need to lobby for more? Or I'm just kind of curious how you approach policy and lobbying and trying to get laws changed.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to advocate on issues in which you feel strongly and know something about. We did testify on behalf of the family. Now we're forgetting the name, but the Family Act that provided for finally a kind of minimum reprieve for parents of newborn kids, and of course we have testified quite extensively on behalf of environmental organizations, and then we've sued on behalf of Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante. I think it's important to, and I think as we become larger, we'll probably take more public positions. And I think our sense with this administration is that it's very important to take public stands on the things we know about and that are important to us.
Has Patagonia ever given to officially as a business to political candidates?
Yes.
Okay.
We did in the last election. We were actually prevented from doing so as a company, as all companies are, until the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court. But in this last election, we endorsed 2 candidates, John Tester in Montana, who was running for re-election and had a really good record on public lands issues, and then also for the Democratic candidate in Nevada. And similarly, she had a really good record, and we felt in these 2 cases that it was very close to the bone, that these were issues we knew strongly about, and we should endorse. And they both won, which was gratifying.
But you don't have a K Street lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. now that you guys have on payroll?
No, we don't.
No. Okay, well, we have our the last thing on here is financial transparency, and would you speak at all about what you see the responsibility of the company to be transparent, or how you go about it at Patagonia?
Yeah, it's interesting actually with numbers. We're not very, since we're privately held, we're not obligated to reveal our sales figures, and we don't. But internally, we're very transparent about the numbers, and we think it's important that everybody in the company understand them, and so we communicate them to every employee. Interestingly enough, you can always find out how much Patagonia is selling because we're very upfront about how much we give to environmental causes. So you can extrapolate, just take that that 1% figure we give you for what we give for environmental causes, and you can figure out how much we're selling.
Yeah, I have noticed that it seems like folks I've talked to at Patagonia are shy about saying when it's reached $1 billion in sales.
Yeah.
Is there like a conscious, like, we don't want to talk too much about getting to $1 billion or something like that? Or is that just more of natural humility or something?
It was. I mean, I think there are a couple of things. One is that we don't as a policy talk about our sales and profitability. But second, I think that there was a sense in the company both, oh my gosh, we're getting to be $1 billion, and that means we're a certain size that we never thought we would be. And also there's a kind of oh shit feeling that that you're really, that what you do really does make a difference, and that at a certain size it also becomes all the more important. I think we've talked about this before, to redouble your efforts to reduce your environmental footprint, because what you have to do is, if you're growing, is you have to stay ahead of that growth. There's another factor, I think, which is maybe unique to us. I remember when we were approaching the $5 million mark, and people saying, "Oh my God, we're gonna lose our soul. We're not going to be able to be the company we were at this particular size." And I remember that at 5 million and 10 million and 50 million and 100 million and 300 million. And in each case, I think that the company kind of adjusted that. It still felt as though, not that the corporation has a soul, but the company has a soul. I think that the aggregation and the community of people there. So this was another milestone, like 5 million, 50 million, and 100 million. And how do you stay true to yourself when you're successful in that way?
Yeah, I think the soul is called Elon. Well, I mean, it's obviously more than that, but I imagine if you had a different CEO or a different owner at each of those, it might feel different,
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you have, I think we have about 600 people on the campus in Ventura. So there's absolutely no question that Yvon set the tone, allowed this company to flourish in the way it has. But he also had to be successful in allowing this culture to realize itself, because he couldn't have done it on his own. It's also the collective work of all the people who work there.
Well, Vincent, I think we're probably at time.
Okay.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. Lift is an impact consulting firm whose mission is to create, model, and share a locally self-reliant economy that works for the benefit of all life. To listen to all our past episodes or to share your thoughts about the show with us, visit www.lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can also subscribe to this podcast through iTunes, Overcast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please take a moment to rate us on iTunes. It's really very helpful in allowing these ideas to reach a wider audience. Once again, thanks for listening.